Well, welcome everyone. I'm Carla Vian, and on behalf of Literacy Action Network, I'd like to welcome you to the second in a series of 4 manager-focused webinars. Today's webinar will be focusing on ABE teacher recruitment and training for ABE managers. Today's webinar will last approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes at the end for questions. The webinar will be posted to our Minnesota Administrators Schoology group, and we'll be sending out that information will be located on the Literacy Action Network website, so you can find that information at our website. So at this point, I would like to turn the webinar over to Debbie Cushman at the Minnesota Literacy Council.
All right, thanks, Carla. This is Debbie in St. Paul, sunny St. Paul, and here we go.
Oh, are we not advancing?
Try that. Just by way of quick introduction of myself. So I've been doing human resources and other things for about 25 years. And I actually started in a school district in Wisconsin. My last year in grad school, I worked for transit up here in the cities, Metro Transit, did some corporate stuff. And then I've been for about, I don't know, 15, 16 years, something like that. Been around the Literacy Council for a while, so I've hired lots of teachers and lots of other staff here at the agency. So folks asked me to come and talk a little bit in response, I think, to challenges with teacher shortages or teacher challenges with getting teachers and other ABE staff on board. So that's what I've prepared for today, and we'll definitely stick around for questions at the end as well. So what I'm going to focus on is kind of 2 buckets, if you will. We'll just spend a few minutes thinking about external factors or market factors that essentially are beyond our control. So there's not a lot that we can do about those, but I think it's good to spend a little time thinking about what those factors in the marketplace might be that are creating pressures on us as we try to do hiring. And then we'll switch gears and look at internal considerations, and those are things that we actually have some influence over in terms of how we want to approach things like job design and how we get the word out, how we think long-term about making versus buying the talent in our organizations and things like that. And so I know folks come from lots of different types of organizations, districts and nonprofits. So I'll try to make this as general as possible. But of course, the Literacy Council is my lens. So that's my point of view as I kind of go through this stuff here. So with that, looking at Minnesota unemployment, so this chart that's up right now, for most purposes, 3.2% unemployment is basically 0. It's a really super tight market right now, and you'll see that trajectory. This is interesting, actually. So nationwide is still trending downwards a little bit. Minnesota's had a couple of up and down blips in the past few years, but we've been hovering either at or below 4%. So what I've been seeing in terms of applicants for positions that we have open here at the Literacy Council, you don't have too many categories of applicants. So you have people who are presently employed. The vast majority of the applicants I'm seeing, they have a job right now. They are looking for promotion or advancement or changing their hours. There's something that they're after in terms of their employment conditions or terms that they're looking to change. So that's one group of folks, and they're a little harder to convince to come on board because they've already got employment. So it's got to be something good for them something that matches their needs for them to switch gears. And then there's this smaller group of people who are unemployed, who are in that classic group of people who want to move back to Minnesota. So they might be folks who went somewhere for grad school, or they followed a partner someplace, or they're coming back to maybe care for parents, that kind of thing. Or they're just getting off of a Peace Corps assignment, that kind of thing. So they're people who are moving around, or just kind of coming back, or re-entering the workforce after maybe staying home with kids, or again, caring for parents, that kind of thing. So we don't have, with this kind of a market, we just don't have the breadth of candidates out there. And of course, that does vary regionally as you move around the state, but these are some pretty low numbers. And I just saw an article last week that was yet another conversation about the mystery of why we're not seeing wage growth. And none of the economists in that article really had any compelling arguments for that. It's kind of a mystery. With unemployment this low for this long, we should be seeing more salary growth. And I guess we're still just kind of waiting for that to happen. So a little bit of a macro perspective on that. And I left Wisconsin in there since some of our, obviously some of the folks who work in Minnesota live in Wisconsin and vice versa along the border there. So. All right, and then thinking more regionally and locally about how we can intersect with market factors and things that are happening out there. I just have a few things for us to kind of ponder related to how we can think about the competition. So who else is competing for the applicants that we want to see in our pool, and how can we make our opportunities more attractive? So these are things that sometimes the Literacy Council does, sometimes we don't. I'll just kind of take them one by one. So promoting the kind of the perks or the non-monetary rewards for working that exist in your organization. So when we advertise, this isn't about teachers, but when we advertise for interns, one of the things that's super attractive is this access to all of our training for free, because we have lots of students who come to us who want to do things. And so we waive all of the fees for folks who are interning with us. Things for teachers that are kind of attractive is that they have a lot of autonomy over their curriculum, over how they want to design their lesson flow. They're not working in, inside a district setting. This always makes me chuckle when I share this, but people are like, no, actually a lot of organizations took their food away, and we still we provide lunch once a month when we all get together. We have lots of gatherings internally. What are some things that you can kind of promote, like related to office space, flexible work hours, working from home when that's possible for things like prep time or curriculum work, all of those other things that wrap around the core job responsibilities that could make a position more attractive to outside candidates. The second one is, I put bonuses in quotes because we definitely in a nonprofit setting don't, I think, can only think once in 12 years.
I know I've never gotten a bonus.
Right. I can think of once where we had some mystery dollars that showed up, and I think everybody got $100 or something. It doesn't happen very often. But what I mean by bonuses are things that you might be able to be flexible with. So that could, and again, if you're in a union contract environment, obviously there are other constraints at play. But I've seen creative offerings around an extra day off, or just trying to mix things up a little bit if it's non-monetary, so that there's some kind of acknowledgement or reward. Gift cards is something that's been really popular around rewarding people. So that could be for current employees for referring applicants, or it could be on the retention side. There was lots of crazy stuff going on maybe 20 years ago in the IT industry. For any of you who've been out in the workforce for that long, IT professionals were super hard to come by, and they were getting all kinds of cool and shiny bonuses. And it's not something we can do a lot with, but even some kind of small gesture can be kind of exciting for folks. Everybody loves a $25 Amazon card or whatever. So. The third one is thinking about sort of overall brand. So just like with our learners, word of mouth is really powerful among humans, and there's always some kind of word on the street about like what it's like to work for organization ABC or XYZ. So thinking about ways to this, I know sounds kind of corporate, but how to sort of position your brand or how to frame it that this is the place where you want to work in this community if you want to do this kind of work. So this is like the go-to place for teachers who want to work. This is where you want to be. And we'll talk about attracting candidates from other fields as well in a little bit. But, so kind of, and how do you find out what people think? We do exit interviews, and we also do 3-month check-ins with all of our new hires. So there's lots of ways you could check in with people about. We also do an employee engagement survey here every year. So there are lots of different ways you can find out, what people are saying or thinking about your organization. And then that last one there, if you don't remember anything else from this slide, I would say that that's probably the most important takeaway. Hiring is moving really fast, and I cannot tell you how many top applicants I've lost just by waiting for the close date. So generally speaking, we have a 2-week posting window here. I actually start phone screening candidates like on day 3 of the posting as qualified candidates come in. And one conversation that we've had to hear several times recently is, well, how do I know, how does a manager know who they want to talk to or bring in if the job hasn't closed yet and they can't see kind of all of the candidates in the job file? But one thing to keep in mind is that you're really screening applicants against the requirements of the position, not against each other. So keeping that in mind, let's say you're asking for a minimum of 3 years of teaching experience plus a master's or licensure, for example. As folks come in who meet those requirements, I would look hard at connecting with them quickly, because applicants they're leaving the pipeline really fast. And I find even by getting through the phone screens, I have a job file. It's not a teacher file, but it's a program assistant. It closed on Tuesday last week, and I was finished with all of my phone screens for that job file by Thursday and had started them like the week before. So, so just really encourage you to act quickly if you see good folks.
If you don't, you will lose them.
They will disappear, yeah. So, so I borrowed this cool infographic or diagram, I guess, from HR.com. If you Google images for employee lifecycle, lots and lots of things will come up. I like this one because it hit on sort of the big buckets. And I'm showing this because at the very top there is the recruitment phase. So what's making your organization attractive to outside candidates? But I think it's worth keeping in mind that all of the other segments of this cycle factor into people's psychology as they're considering job opportunities. So they're thinking about things like, well, what kind of professional development am I going to get in this role if I take it? And are employees generally motivated there? Do they feel like they're getting recognition from supervisors, from the community? All of those kinds of things. So human motivation is a super complex and mysterious thing. We'll probably never really understand why people do what they do, but these are things to keep in mind as you're promoting your opportunities out into the community. All right, and then let's move to internal here.
Okay.
And we'll talk about short-term and long-term. So we're going to kind of divide this internal stuff into 2 categories. So got 3 things on this slide. So job design, again, recognizing that not every employer has as much flexibility as maybe nonprofits do around changing your job requirements, but we're going to actually look. I've got a slide coming up that shows our qualifications for ESL teacher. We actually are not requiring licensure or master's degree. We do say that those are strongly preferred, but there are lots and lots of ways people can get qualified on the job experience as well. So, and I would say just broadly speaking with the rest of our positions at the agency, by and large, we, especially around entry-level positions like coordinator, site coordinator, things like that, we've just gotten rid of the requirement of a college degree altogether, recognizing that experience can substitute for education. So thinking about that job design, and if you can open it up a little bit more, then you'll be including more potential applicants. And then of course the networking thing, where can you get the word out? With our AmeriCorps cohorts lately, we've been doing some creative stuff like making classroom presentations at colleges and technical colleges and universities to groups where we think we might have populations of folks who would be interested. Are there listservs? Are there other ways you could use social media? What are the job boards that people are really looking at? I will say we've tried some of the big commercial things like, what is it, Indeed. I think we've dabbled in Craigslist. In this metro, that doesn't do much for us. The Council of Nonprofits and then these really dedicated specific recruitment listservs are really the groups that bring us the best applicants. But that varies, you know, according to region. And then the last one here is interviewing and selection. So behaviorally based questions are the best way to go when interviewing candidates. And I'll talk more specifically about what those questions might look like in a second. But the basic idea is that you're asking people to tell you about knowledge, skills, abilities, experiences that they've had that specifically relate to the work that you're asking them to do in your organization. And that's based on the premise that one of the best predictors of future behavior is past behavior. And so we're asking folks to tell us how they've done this work before so that we know they can do it now. So that would be the first thing I would do, is screen against those qualifications, ask about behaviorally based experiences. And then that second sentence is, after that, once you know that let's say you've got three or four candidates or whatever, you know who can do the job, then consider things like personality. How would they fit in with your team? What other new and different things do they bring you? Do they bring you another foreign language capability? And then I also think about potential at that point. Hiring managers don't like me to think about potential, but nothing makes me happier than to bring someone into the organization for a specific job, knowing that they have experience that would actually relate to other things we do here, and that would give them a longer lifespan at the agency. So
she's always trying to poach our best people.
Transfers and promotions are like the most exciting thing for an HR person. So, all right, and I don't want to run too much over my allotted time here, but I do want to just look at this for a second. So, like I said, the first bullet, I know these qualifications are going to vary quite a bit across ABE service providers, but this is what we do right now. We love certifications and masters and all of that. And that said, many of our teachers are super qualified, but this has given us an opportunity to consider candidates who maybe had an alternate trajectory. And were, you know, doing a bunch of Peace Corps stuff for a while, and they aren't credentialed yet, but they have tons of on-the-ground experience. And then just in terms of behaviorally based questions, to give you a couple of thoughts on that. So going down to bullet 4, the ability to respond effectively to individual and cultural needs, as well as different learning styles. So I'd like to ask a question. Could you please share an example with me about a time that you navigated either a situation with boundaries, a situation with a new learner coming into your class that presented a challenge you weren't familiar with, you know, examples like that that show or that demonstrate these skills on the job. And I'd be happy to, I can work with Carla if it's helpful to this group to get you know, a set of interview questions. Happy to share the It's been finding more and more.
Oh, you can't hear us?
Are we there? Are we on again?
I wonder why that would be.
It's back. It was just gone for a
It's
bit.
back. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably just a weird internet slowdown or something.
Okay.
Hardware looks good here. So
Sorry about that, everybody.
just quickly, the last one, ability to work the hours required by the position. You might also with that. So, and then I think I just have one slide left. So longer term considerations, this isn't anything that's going to help you solve a teacher hiring challenge that you have today, but philosophically, I think it's a good thing for every organization to think about, do you want to buy your talent from the marketplace? Are you expecting to attract candidates who are already ready to go? Or do you have the capacity and interest to grow your own talent? So that would mean taking on AmeriCorps positions or encouraging volunteers to pursue credentialing, that kind of thing, and kind of looking at the long term and building the capacity of community members who are right there where your organization is to be a part of your teacher corps going forward. And then I do just want to highlight the Coalition to Increase Teachers of Color and American Indian Teachers. So this is a group, their website is there. This is a group that's been working hard for the last couple of years to address this incredible teaching shortage for teachers of colors and American Indian teachers in Minnesota. And our executive director, Eric Nussheim, just happened to run into one of the leaders of this group at a different function a couple of months ago and got adult basic education on their radar. Their focus is K-12, but they are now, we've been a member for a couple of years, but they're making sure to keep ABE in mind. And so you can look at the white papers on their website, their legislative briefings, et cetera. They're really looking at alternative credentialing paths, mentorships, stipends, all those kinds of incentives and opportunities to really change the landscape there. So this is a long-term proposition. It's going to take us a while, but we're proud to be working with that group and excited about what they're doing. So that's all I have for now, and I'll stick around for questions.
I think we'll turn it over to Karen.
Okay, so are we back? Okay, so I've been asked to talk about how we onboard our teachers and train them in-house, and specifically some of the professional development and ways that we keep that going. Next slide. Okay, so I thought I would give you just a little context. Mankato Adult Basic Ed consists of 6 school districts in South Central Minnesota. We have 5 sites, approximately 850 students annually, generating about 85,000 contact hours. So we have a total of 38 staff. And I think it's important just to give you a little context about what our setting is like, because some of what I talk about may fit you, may not, but we do have a couple of one-room schoolhouse sites, and then we have quite a large center. So we do rely on multiple leaders in our organization to do some of the training for the teachers. So you can see we have roughly 20 teachers at any given time. 5 of them are full-time, 3 of them have lead teacher duties, so they're directly involved in the trainings. And then our part-time teachers are also involved, because so a lot of times a teacher we hire may have another partner teacher who's teaching at that same level that they might be going to for a lot of things when they first get hired. So today I'm just going to talk about teachers and how we onboard teachers, but we can also use the same method that we use for teachers with our other groups, such as teaching assistants, our preschool childcare staff, and that's a childcare that is just for our ABE students. So next slide. So I have what's called a licensed instructor training checklist. And if you want to open that up, Susan, this checklist is what I use to onboard our teachers as a way to kind of keep track of what they need to do. And stop, yeah, right there. And this training checklist is extremely helpful for both the people doing the training and the trainee. So as you can see, we hand this out at the first meeting we have with someone once they've been hired. And our process here in Mankato is pretty streamlined in that everything is done online as far as hiring goes. Applications are submitted online. Once you do your interviews, you click who you want to be hired. It sends an automatic process to the business office and the HR office, and then we get a letter from HR that says, this is your staff's credentials, login information, email, everything. And then I just sit down and I'm the first point of contact with a new teacher when they're hired. And the first thing I do is go through that and log them into their email, and then they can access through the internet a lot of these opportunities. We give them this electronically as a Google Doc. Then I can check in and look at that too, because it's shared with them as a Google Doc. And they can go in and mark it and put dates in there as they complete things. So the first thing that I talk about with a new teacher is there's required professional development that you're going to need to do to be able to do your job, but then there's optional professional development depending on where you're at. So for example, this year I hired a teacher who came from another neighboring consortium and had been around in the ABE field for some time. And so she already had ABE foundations complete from a previous employment. She had done some ACEs work, knew about North Star. So some of these initial trainings on standards, she already knew. The thing she didn't know was our professional learning communities and how that works. So we just kind of went through this checklist and started checking off the things she already knew, and then started talking about what would be an appropriate starting point for trainings. So as you can see on this checklist, just in this first part, a lot of these things are offered through the MLC or offered at Summer Institute, at ABE regionals. We don't try to do any of that here because that training is already established and in place. I just refer them to the modality they want to use to get that. The professional learning communities that we have here are kind of our main way that we connect our staff with each other and help them learn in teams. So we have professional learning communities for every person that's working in ABE. We have, for example, an ESL PLC where all of our ESL teachers meet monthly for about 2 hours monthly as a group. We have our adult diploma and employment team, which would be anybody who's working in like GED high school diploma or any credentialing programs such as Pathways to Prosperity, Fast Track, College Connections, things like that. And then we have a PLC for teaching assistants, and we have a PLC for office professionals. And each of those groups meets as a team monthly. We also have our ABE leadership team, and that's another PLC. In the PLCs, they are meeting for teachers specifically. They are meeting to mainly look at data, and that's things like post-testing data, data on who's making level gains and who's not. Also data on what standards are being implemented in what classes. They are always working on their ABE narratives and their course curriculum and their syllabus. And so when teachers are new and they get that initial training on all the different standards, then the PLCs is the way that they maintain that and keep working on it and deepen their practice through that monthly meeting. If you could scroll down just a little bit, Susan, you'll see little ways down there, you can see bullying basics. That's something our district requires every teacher to take. Emergency procedures, I always go over that right away before they're in the classroom by themselves. I have them sign up for the ABE Connect newsletter immediately when I meet with them. Everybody gets a LAN membership. We always buy an organizational membership, and then that comes with a COABE membership. So they'll start getting emails from COABE and can join any PD that they see that looks interesting to their area. The optional trainings, our district does provide spring and fall, what we call learning academies for anyone that works in our district. And a lot of those sessions will help them with their licensure renewal units and the required areas that keep changing. So that's helpful. That ABE newsletter and the MLC online course catalog are always available to them. If you could scroll down to the next page, this is kind of where the checklist starts. So I have every teacher meet, so stop right there, meeting with the ABE program coordinator, and then I would write in the name of the coordinator, which right now is me. That's the first meeting that they'll have is with me. And I go over all of the things on this checklist. It usually takes me multiple meetings. I can't do all that in one meeting. But these are some of the things that we need to cover in their first few months. So for example, going through their teacher agreement, I have a Google Doc teacher agreement that has their job description, their assignment, the hours they're working, what their FTE is, all their time cards are linked in there. We have a professional development Google Doc that tracks their professional development. So every time they do something for professional development, they enter it into that Google Doc. And so we have all of that tracked for them so they know what they've done. They can look back at what they've done. And then I just talk through all these things that we do, like we set annual goals as a staff. We have our ABE, I go through the ABE narrative, the most recent narrative, so that they can look in there at any point and check out policies, procedures, how we do things. I take them around and introduce them to people. We talk about the benefits, all of those things. If you can scroll down, one of the things, Charlotte Danielson framework, that is our evaluation tool that we use. We use the Charlotte Danielson framework. And so we set up their evaluations because every staff in our system needs to be evaluated on year one and then every third year. So I explain how that works and get them set up with their evals. And that's another piece of ongoing professional development is doing those evaluations so that teachers know what's going well, what to be working on, who to connect with. The next piece of the checklist is with our lead teacher. So our system is set up in Mankato ABE so that I have one person, one of the teachers is a lead teacher. That's a specific position. It doesn't change from year to year. And that person leads the PLCs and is kind of in charge of the programming in that area. So for example, Liv Musil-Stalo is our lead ESL teacher. And so all the ESL teachers go to a PLC that's led by Liv, I'm sorry. Angie Blackstad is our high school completion and employment. We call it ADE, Adult Diploma in Employment PLC leader. And she is in charge of all questions related to programming for GED, Adult Diploma, and Fast Track. So what they're doing is meeting with the teacher to go through very specific things like syllabus, curriculum, resources, all the course narratives that have all the standards aligned in every course, and so teachers know what they're supposed to be teaching. They also help them understand how to find substitutes, take time off. We have what's called emergency sub-plans and all of that. If you want to slide down to the next section, the next person that they would meet with would be the secretary. And actually, this isn't really any specific order. I usually have them meet with the secretary right away because the secretary gives all the logistical information that they need to know how to function in their job. As you can see, a lot of that is just using the phones, the break room, where things are, how to get their supplies, how to use the copier and stuff. The intake and assessment supervisor would be our accountability person. So that meeting would involve learning SID, how to log in, how to take attendance. Everything we do here is real time. So if teachers choose to have people sign in class and then put it into SID, it needs to be done immediately after class. A lot of the teachers take attendance in the classroom right away, real time. So we talk about how to do that, how to enter messages, how to put in assessments or whatever if you are testing people. That person is in charge of doing TABE and CASAS training if appropriate for each person that needs to learn that. We also talk through the distance learning and proxy hours and policies when you meet with her. So and then the volunteer tutor coordinator is the last person. So each of these meetings with the different people who coordinate different areas, it may be one meeting, it may be a series of meetings, kind of depending on what that teacher is going to be doing. But what we've learned is that having a checklist like this with everything laid out is super helpful because they know they're going to get training. For one, when they see the checklist, they're like, okay, you're gonna provide me the tools that I need to do this job. It's kind of a reassurance for them that we're not going to just put you in a classroom and ask you in a month how's it going. There's a process here for making sure that we do this consistently throughout the program. And it also it's meant to not overwhelm them, because I tell them, this is a process. Training doesn't happen in like 2 weeks and all of a sudden you know everything. This is something that happens over time. It may take you 2 months to a year to get through this checklist, depending on how relevant and timely everything is. And you may learn it once and have to come and circle back to it because it didn't make sense or the timing wasn't right on the first time you were trained on it. So they'll often write dates next to those bullet points, and then there'll be another date if they had to come back and review it again. But it takes them quite a while to get through all of this. Another thing that's kind of an interesting phenomenon is at what point in the year that someone gets hired. So, we always think, oh, you're going to hire somebody at the beginning of the year and they're going to stick with you the whole year, which is not the case. Sometimes people go out on a leave, or we've had people suddenly pass away, where you have to onboard somebody in the middle of the year. And so I do really appreciate that we have like ABE foundations, both online, or if you hit it just right and they can go to the Summer Institute, they can do that face to face, if their hiring is just at the right time. So so this is how we kind of ensure that people get what they need as they come on board. And if you don't have a lot of supervisory staff in your program and you are kind of the one-room schoolhouse, you're the only trainer, you could still create a checklist like this and just have it be by topic rather than by person or by person you're going to meet with. You could just create it and make it work for your one-room schoolhouse as well. Any questions?
This is really great, Karen.
It seems
where like you could have a lot of these things linked, like this, link directly to SID and with like
right.
what the SID manual is and stuff like that. Like then you wouldn't have to be sending people all this separate stuff on email. You could just have it all in one document.
Yeah, I find myself, every time I train someone, I find myself updating this document because we have taken this document and we have made a copy of it and then modified it to be a secretary training list. So for example, if, we probably only hire a secretary once every 5 years here, they stay for quite a while. So you go and look at it and things are outdated, right? Because technology keeps changing, processes keep changing. So every time I hire a new person, I take this document, I make a copy of it, put the person's name on it so that's their document. And then I have to go in and I have to edit some things out, add some things in, because not every single person is going to be administering TABE, for example. Not every person is going to be using volunteers if they're working off-site. So I find myself modifying this almost with every hire. But also it's nice to have kind of a checklist for each position. So I have one that's for like a teaching assistant paraprofessional. I have another one for the secretary. And some of the things are exactly the same. And then there's categories that change based on position.
And I would imagine it's really helpful for you too, just so you don't forget things, right?
Right,
So that, oh
right.
yeah, we hit on all these really key factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, about a month ago, we hired somebody like maybe 2 months ago, and we also have a new secretarial position this year, a new secretary in our position this year. And one of our office staff came to me and said, I feel like there's some holes in what this person's learning. Could we pull up the checklist and see how far she is on it? Because I think this is the time for certain things to be addressed. And so we pulled it up and looked, and this person hadn't yet met with one of the people that was on the list. So it was perfect timing to address that. And it was a good way to say, oh, it's time for you to do this section because we notice this is relevant now. And so I think having a checklist, it's really not meant to be overwhelming. You look at it and go, whoa, I got to have all these meetings with these people. It's like, no, you're just going to come across, just so you can see here, these are the things that are going to come up in the next several months to a year. These are the things that you're going to need to learn. And you
Some
may
of it you know right away, like how to enter your attendance and sit and where's your classroom and where are the,
yes.
things like that,
Yep.
and payroll. And then other things, maybe 2 months in, you really need to know.
Right. Or for example, student non-progress policy, it's not something I'm going to bring up right away, but maybe after they get through a round or two of testing and somebody's not making progress, we need to start talking about interventions and we need to start talking about non-progress policy, because you don't want to talk about that 2 years in. You want to talk about that so that they have time to work with someone. The first day, that's not going to be remembered because it's too much to give them in the first day,
Yep. They won't remember it anyway, so you may as well just hold
Right.
it till later. But if it's on the list, then you don't miss it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great. Thanks, Karen.
Yep.
All right. I think I'm going to go back 2 slides. All right. Everybody should be able to see the slide deck again. Let me know if you can't. And I had a little bit of time here at the end to talk about statewide professional development offerings. Interestingly, though, I think Karen already mentioned all the things that I was going to point out, except for one. So I will just be real quick here because I do want to have time for everybody to have their questions as well. So for new teachers, as Karen mentioned, the really critical first piece is to make sure that everybody gets ABE Foundations. And that's offered through Atlas. Now it used to be LAN, but Carla has still been working some, I think, with getting the materials online and things. So it's still a bit of a collaboration. But it's offered at Summer Institute as a pre-conference face-to-face. But then if you are hiring midway through the year, it's also an online course that Atlas has. And so if you go over to the Atlas webpage, they've got all the Atlas or all the ABE Foundations stuff right here. And you can take the online course. And then the other thing that's related to ABE Foundations that I think is really critical to share with new staff is this ABE Foundations Handbook, which has all of the documents in it related to the content that's presented in that training, but it's also just a really great reference for new teachers to come back to. So if you want information about content standards, like, okay, I remember the CCRS, but what were the other two again? And they're here, and you can come back and find them pretty much all in one place. And then in the professional development category on the handbook, there are these documents that list out upcoming events, all the different support network providers, and who the contact information is for each of those agencies, all of the online stuff that people can access anytime, and then also all of the job embedded professional development, so the long-term cohorts that people can sign up for, and what some of the deadlines are for those. One other thing that the Statewide Professional Development Committee is working on right now is actually a website that will be available through Atlas that is going to be a professional development catalog that will have all of the opportunities in one place from all the different support network providers. And it's a little bit different from the Atlas calendar, because the calendar is just things that are scheduled. So they have a date and there's a registration link and you can go actually sign up for it. But things that we know are coming up that haven't been scheduled yet or don't have a registration form yet, those aren't on the calendar. So let's say Summer Institute next year. We don't have a registration form open for that yet, but we all know it's coming, right? Well, you wouldn't find it on the Atlas calendar. So the catalog is going to be a place that will just list all of the things and when they are typically scheduled. So every summer, third week in August is Summer Institute, right? So, and then there'll be information that will link out to where you can get more information. And oftentimes it'll direct back to the calendar for registration dates. But the catalog will just have all the different things, and including cohorts that you can request, like study circles. If you want to run a study circle in your area, here's who to contact to find out how to make that happen, right? So that catalog is due to launch sometime this spring. We're working on making it right now. So that's another one to keep your eye on, to share with new staff when it's available. And then the other thing is the Atlas calendar and, of course, signing up for the ABE Connect newsletter. Both of those are at Atlas ABE, and just making sure that all staff are getting that Connect newsletter because it has so many opportunities in it. And that's really all I wanted to share. Most everything else was already talked about by Karen, so I'm actually going to open it up for questions now.
Susan, do you want to advance? There we go to the last slide. Maybe before we go to questions, there's a to continue the discussion on Schoology. All of these links will be put, and also the webinar recording and the slideshow will be on the Schoology. And if you want to either screenshot this, or this will be on the LAN website. There you can find the MN ABE administrators group that you can join, and there's the code that you can put in. And if you have any questions, we'll take questions here shortly, but if you want to further the discussion with any of our presenters or with yourself, we hope, or amongst yourselves, we hope that would be a platform for, new administrators or even administrators who have been around that can kind of lend their expertise, that it might be a place for you to continue on with the discussion of some of the different things that we've talked about today.